So we'll talk about ring usability, right? And how we simplified a few things in the ring to get you a more of an appliance-like experience whenever you use the ring, right? From the installation to use it and to post-sales with support typically. So 3 subjects here, right? We worked on the new installer, right? And we're going to give you details of that. I'm going to show you a video as well of an install, right? It's going to be accelerated because otherwise we would spend a few 10 or 20 minutes to do it for real. But it'll give you a sense of the different steps that we have in installer today and how it's changed since the previous version of the installer. We've been working on a new admin GUI as well. And you will see that it's kind of like the same theme as the one that you've seen with Zenko. It's a black background. And so, a new simplified admin GUI. And we have a new tool that we call the S-Report tool for support, which is like a data collection tool when you have your install, which is done, right? And that we collect and we store in a database at Scality. And whenever you have, let's say you open a support ticket and you have an issue, one of the first things we're going to do is run a new S-Report and compare, right? Have you changed something? Have you been, doing some tuning or, changing in the SMB stack or the NFS layer, right? So starting with the installer. So before joining the dark side of the marketing, technical marketing, I was in the field, and I know how important it is to have a great, first experience with the product, right? And one of the first that you have is whenever you install it for a POC or for an install. What we had before that tool was a collection of things. So we have a sizer, we have few scripts that are going to verify the OS which is installed, verify the network interface, verify how much RAM, how much CPU you have on those machines, right? And then after that, run the install. And you had different commands and different things to run to do the S3 install, to do the file system layer install, to install the connectors and the storage node, right? So what we did is that we simplified all that, and we created a tool which is going to do it from the very beginning, whenever you design an architecture for a customer, right, up to when you install everything and you deliver something which is going to give them S3 access, NFS, SMB, right? So it really starts with what we call the sizing tool. We're a software company, but we end up doing a lot of sizing, a lot of hardware sizing, right? I don't know, you have a prospect that wants a 5 petabyte usable ring, and those guys are an HP shop, right? We have an Excel sheet, actually, where we take a lot of input from those guys. What's the usable capacity? What connectors do you want? Do you want NFS? Do you want S3? Do you have any performance requirements for streaming and coding or your backups, right? We take all that into account. How many sites? How much protection do you want in a product, right? We shake everything, and it gives you a sizing. So how many HP nodes do you have? How many Cisco or Dell storage nodes do you have? How many connectors, NFS connectors, do you need to have your throughput, right? But we've extended that tool now to give to input a lot more information. The IP of the machine, the network configuration, how much RAM, how much CPU, blah, blah, etc. So to give you as much information as you can to use as the installer. And we use the exit of that, which is in a CSV file, an Excel sheet file, that we give as an input to the installer. Yep.
So do you have a hardware compatibility guide?
It's not a compatibility guide per se, because we can run on pretty much any x86 server, right? Right. But we have reference architectures with Cisco, Dell, HP.
Can you deploy as virtual appliances, or bare metal is the only option?
You talk about VMs, for example. Yeah. For POCs, yeah. For do a test. We can even deploy a ring on Docker today, like just few nodes, 3 nodes, to run on Docker that you deploy in a matter of 10-15 minutes. Right. But really to do functional tests, right? To play with it, play with the S3 interface.
So what's the base operating system of Ring?
Run on Linux, and same thing here.
Which flavor?
Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu, and Debian are supported today.
So that's
SUSE
so that's the customer's choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the customer is going to say, I want HP. I've got a preference for that model. I want to run CentOS on it.
Okay.
Right? And we know how complicated it is when you install the packages of the product. Like the network is not properly configured, or you were expecting that much CPU or RAM. And it's not been delivered like that, so it's not going to perform as expected, right?
So how long does the design process take?
The design in the tool here?
No, design. So I'm a customer. I come to you. I say I've got these requirements.
In a matter
However
of
many petabytes of data. So the design process is fairly quick.
fairly quick, in a matter of 5-10 minutes, maybe a bit more. You know, there's a few tweakings you can do. You can give him a pretty good idea of what you will need to put in place to have petabyte on 3 sites or 2 sites, typically, right?
So
With erasure coding, whatever, and replication.
So then we've got a validated bill of materials. How long does it take to implement, assuming the customer has the hardware already ready?
Okay, so good point. So the next step then is the hardware has been delivered, it's been set up. We know exactly how we want it to be set up. We pre-design, pre-put the IPs and everything. And you want it, so I'm going to play the video a little bit here. Whoops. So it might go a little bit fast, and it's going to be a little bit small as well, so you might not be able to see everything. But you will see that the guy here is playing with the tool. Well, playing. He's starting to design a configuration, right? So you can see the storage nodes, the connector. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the layers that we have. So we have the storage layer with all the disk where we do erasure coding and replication. A layer on top, which is the connector layer, giving you NFS, SMB, S3 access. And then we have one machine for administration that we call the supervisor, right? Where you connect and you have an access to the GUI, and we'll talk about it. But then here, you're going to give a lot more information. What machine do you use for the S3 connector, for the S3 metadata? What machine is going to be part of the data ring, of the metadata ring? What machine is going to be the connector, the type of machine? And it's going to go the OS, the IP, everything that you can put in there. And we're going to use that.
So how many servers do I need if I want to start?
So the minimum number of storage nodes that you need to start a ring is 6, right? Because we need, a minimum to do typically a 4+2 erasure coding, right?
Yeah.
And that would be it, because the connector layer can be installed on those storage nodes as well.
Okay.
It can be separate if you want to be able to scale those independently, but it can run on the 6 nodes typically.
And do you have a
Production
minimum?
environment, sorry, because a Docker could run on 3 nodes typically, or even.
Yeah, sure. And do you have a minimum in capacity?
License, we're still around 200 terabytes, right? Yeah, that hasn't changed. So the minimum is really the 200 terabytes. The sweet spot would be around 500 terabytes to up to a petabyte, right? Where really makes sense for with those fat machines today. It's with HP, Cisco, and Dell. It's getting really difficult to design something with 200 terabytes on 6 nodes, right? It's like, ugh. You're gonna have more, right? Okay, so I'll let it run for a little bit. So you'll see the guy starting to enter, what are gonna be the roles, which site the server is gonna be, right? Because it can be on 1 site, 2 site, 3 site, and be stretched, and we chunk the data and divide the chunks.
And this spreadsheet, is that publicly available, or is that internal use?
It's not. It's really an internal tool that we have to, to design the architecture.
You're planning on putting this into a HTML5 UI, so it's online, easy to consume?
I don't think so, no.
Sizing tool?
It's really an internal tool. It's been
part of the professional services engagement.
Absolutely,
on an
yeah.
install stage. Yeah.
It's part of the pre-sales as well, because usually those guys want to have an idea of what is it going to take to get a 2 petabyte install.
So
right?
it's
Here you go.
So it's basically like buying a converged stack from any of the historical vendors. It's like, no, tell me exactly what you want. Tell me the configuration.
Exactly.
We'll set you up with a file and dump it out.
Exactly. I want SMB access, NFS access. I've got those performance requirements.
Yeah.
And then I've got 2 sites. I want that kind of like protection schema.
Right.
Check it. Give me a solution. Right. So here you can see that the kind of like the type of the file that we're going to have, a CSV file, and we're going to use that file as an input to the installer command. So run the offline install with the description file, which is, it's a bit small, you can't see it, but So you need root access to access the machine. It's Linux. We'll need to yum install the packages on the machines. Whoop, I just wanted to stop here a little bit as well. So there's going to be different steps, right? We set up the environment and the bootstrap. We use Salt, right? The Salt stack that we deploy on all the machines. So that's the first step, to make sure you have the master and all the other machines running. Step 2, we're going to run the pre-install suite. So we're going to verify that the hardware has been set up as expected, right? When we designed it. Do we have 2 10 gig bounded? Do we have 128 gigabyte of RAM? things like that, right? Then install the ring, then potentially install the ES3 services as well, right? If you want to install S3 on top of it. And then run the post-install suite, which is going to be the ES report, generating a report and send it to Scality.
So do you have network constraints on the network interfaces for the nodes? It must be dual 10 gig. Can you do 1
It
gig?
doesn't have to be, right? But typically you have a private network between the connectors, the supervisor, and the storage nodes.
Right.
It's typically a 10 gig, and it's typically as well dual, band-aid
So
network interface.
what about from a subnetting perspective? Do you have multiple VLANs, like a management and control VLAN,
No,
a
we
data
don't have
VLAN?
constraints on
It's just one. it's
One, that private
one
network,
network.
for the ring, and usually you might have a second interface on the client side, right, on the connectors to present NFS, SMB, whatever.
Do you allow members of a ring to be in different subnets, so it's routed, or they must be in the same L2
No,
subnet?
I guess it could be on different subnets. Yeah. There's no real constraints
All right.
there.
It's all
Yeah.
routable.
All right. Do you have a reference architecture document for customers that describes the best practices for designing?
We have a pretty dense white paper you can download from the website. You'll have a lot of that information in there. Do we have a specific document that gives examples of those? I don't think so, because we don't want to create one specifically that talks about HP or Cisco. We're agnostic, so it could be really pretty much anything. We've even seen people mix and matching different vendors, starting with HP and adding Dell. I think who does that? Dailymotion has it. Right? No real constraint.
For your support, what's your net promoter score rating?
What's the what? Sorry.
NPS.
NPS. What's?
Yeah, Net Promoter. No, we don't actually have a measure on the Net Promoter stuff, so we haven't actually used that. So it's something we're looking into.
Where are your support centers located?
Great question. So we actually have them actually spread across different regions. We have France, US, Japan.
Okay.
So we have some dedicated support center for Japan.
So I'll let it run a little bit. You'll see that, and I cut it a little bit, so it's doing all the install accelerated up to a point at the end where it's going to give you the IP to connect to the supervisor. Okay, so install, pre-install, check done, and then installing the ring, and then so it's different phases, right? So you go in the menu and you choose every time what you want to run. Go. So it's gonna last just it's under 2 minutes. Run and you go at the end. You have this is where you need to connect to start doing the configuration, right? The supervisor typically, and that's actually a good transition for the next subject, which is we have a new admin GUI that we've been designing.
So I want to just pause here just to kind of say what's important about why do we show an installer? Because installers are not that interesting. What we've done here is we've actually taken it from the sizer. So you go into the sizing tool and it spits out basically the config tool, the config output. That config output is then a fully automated install after that. So what's really nice is you go in, you do your configuration, you do your layout, and now a fully automated install deploys everything. That's
So you
pretty
don't
cool.
have an HL, right? So you totally depend on the Linux distribution for what is inside the server, what you will use in your distribution. So
Absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
what the sizer will do is it'll know what the IPs are and what the names are and all of that kind of thing, right? But you're putting in what those configurations are. So yes, you do need to make sure that they are probably following our standards. You probably bought them through HPE or you bought them through Dell or you bought them through Cisco, and we've standard bill of materials from those vendors.
Yeah, and this is really to avoid surprises where you've been doing a specific architecture for a customer. You show up on site to do the install. It's been configured completely differently, and oh, crap.
So
Now
you
you're
don't have an
struggling to do-
HL, but you do have an HL.
We call them
CSV that goes to salt
Certified or-
stack.
Yeah, I know,
Well,
but
the difference is we encourage you to do this or we require you to do
We
this.
know this works. Otherwise, you're
that's
on your
it.
own, bud.
Yeah. You guys have a go-to-market relationship with HPE. What fraction of net new customers is that generating?
Want to address that?
So through our let's cover by direct or indirect sales. I mean, our direct sales path is only about 20% of our sales. About 80% of it actually comes through our partners, and of those, it's actually dominated by the OEMs. So the OEMs are driving I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say you're looking 2/3 of that business.
Yeah.
It's
So-
very healthy.
So
and
for the
partner-
majority of the customers, the whole idea of an HCL just doesn't matter because I'm buying it from
From
somebody,
HP or
Yeah.
from,
somebody who figured out what the hardware is first.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So HPE actually is an investor in the company, right?
HP is an investor in the company. HP is also a very strong go-to-market partner. Cisco is a very strong go-to-market partner. We actually still sell with Dell. HP is an
Okay.
investor and a sales agent for us and a very good partner.
Okay. So do you guys work with Micro Focus?
We
Yes. HP has a really strange strategy, right? Can't figure it out what the hell they're doing.
You talking specifically about object storage or in general?
No, in
Because
general.
I would agree with in general.
In general.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Because it seems like they're pushing all the software stuff to Micro Focus, right?
Yeah. So we don't. I mean, we work very closely with, of course, the storage division there and the server division, both the storage and server division. But yeah, they call it the HPE Scalable Object Storage. So you can go
Okay.
online, you can find out more. Basically, it's a full OEM product that they have.
Right. Thanks.
And actually, news on that, they do provide, of course, level 1, level 2 support as well,
Right.
which is really nice.
Sure.
And when it comes to designing architecture, they use exactly the same tool we use for sizing, right? So they know our,
So there's
best practice
somebody
for-
else you let have it.
Yeah. They know our best practice for, network and erasure coding and all that.
Do you guys currently have any customers in the U.S. public sector?
In the public sector in US, we do, right? Don't know if we can talk about it.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of
Gotta sign.
we've got a couple of
I
their
don't know
3-letter
if-
agencies.
I don't know of any. I can
Awesome.
talk about-
3-letter.
And DOE also uses it.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Yeah. I know of one an hour's drive from me in Santa Fe.
Okay.
Can't say more.
That is one indeed.
You'll get nuked if you do.
All right, new GUI. So we've been designing a new GUI, and in the idea to make it very simple and have really a quick panel to give you a quick overview of what's going on the ring, right? How much data you have in, how much space you have left. You have an issue with a node, a disk. Is there something going on? So really a quick panel to see what's going on. And I'll show you a quick demo.
Pretty.
It is pretty. Yeah,
Does it require a Flash plugin?
I don't think
No,
so.
it's
No, it's all
HTML5, I
HTML5,
hope.
right? Yeah, it's all
New
HTML5.
They
GUI?
need an excuse to get a ring on the screen,
Yes.
Isn't Flash dying or dead or already
Yes.
died
Yes.
multiple
Not
times?
fast
Or?
It's taking a long time to die.
That which is dead will never die.
So in here, you'll see the different layers that we have on the ring, right? So data ring, metadata ring, you have what we call the services that are basically the connectors, S3, NFS, SMB. And then you can deep dive into the node level and the disk level as well. So if you click, and I'll show you a quick demo, so I'll go on the slides really quickly. But if you click on the node, you have a view of the disk, you have a quick view of, how much, data is on the disk if you have a disk that is having an error, an issue, right? Quick, info on the use capacity, the net capacity before erasure coding and replication, and some forecast information as well, right? You're putting that much data a month. If you continue to that trend, in like 20 days, you're going to pretty much have the cluster which is filled up. Filled up meaning up to 80% because you have to kind of like leave some empty space for rebuild and things like that, right? So to that 80% threshold, it's going to give you a trend of what's going on, right? Number of objects and the average size of the object that you put in there. And there's different panels, so so I just talked about that, right? Predictability, forecast, number of objects. We have another GUI here that I'm not going to demo, but Giorgio did a bit of it before, related to the S3 side of things, right? To manage users and groups and policies. We even have one coming for being an S3 client. So if you use CyberDuck today, for example, to connect to an S3 interface, we will have one as well, where you can create buckets and upload files and things like that, right? So there's a GUI on the S3 side as well to do all that management of accounts and groups and policies and on the S3 side. What we've done as well is whenever we have information from the vendor itself, HP, Cisco, and Dell, we have plugins as well that we can put in place to measure fan speed, cache utilization on the machine, CPU, all the metrics that those vendors can give us on the hardware side. We can have a view of that in the GUI, giving you info on that. So view on the statistics and view on the alerts as well. So if you have an issue with the CPU or a fan or a motherboard, something is going on the machine, you have that vendor view of the administration in the GUI as well. We have an extended view as well. So we actually have kind of like two GUIs. One, which is the new one that we developed, which is going to be something you install locally to administer your cluster. And we have one which is cloud-based as well, cloud monitoring GUI, that allows us to connect remotely for the support, for example, and see what's going on if there's a spike in latency on a disk, to do some support and administration remotely as well. So cloud-based, and I'll give you a pic of that in a quick demo as well. So there's many different metrics in now on. You can add your own widgets on, I want to see specific latency or number of put operation on a specific node, for example. You can create your own dashboard and see what's going on. There's two models. There's a standard version with up to 15 metrics and a DCS version, dedicated care service on our side that you can buy as well, where you have the full-blown 100 metrics that you can measure in there. It's a lot of graphs and things all around. So let's take a quick look at really a quick demo of that GUI. I've got, oops, I guess I have to exit the present mode. So it might be a little bit slow. I'm actually remote connected to a machine that we have in Paris. So that's a cluster that we use for developing that GUI, among other things. There's one thing which is missing in that version is the view of the connector layer. So the SMB, the NFS view here. I actually have two rings in there. One which is the data ring, and one which is the metadata ring. So one is using the HDDs, the other one is using the SSDs actually for metadata. And for each of those, you have a view of, so it's actually 285 terabytes. It's full at 21%. And then the use capacity on that ring is 26 terabytes. If you do the math, you will see that 15% of that is not exactly 26 terabytes. That's because this is before we do erasure coding and replication, right? So there's actually more used with the different copies on RAM. An estimated, 169 terabytes available, and some forecast information on what's going on. If you continue like you do, in a year, you're going to be 80% full on that cluster, right? And then you can dig onto, the node level. So if I click here, for example, it's going to give you a view, and it's going to be just a little bit slow because it's getting, info from Paris. A view of, for example, on node number 1, information on, load average, the CPU usage on that node. You have, metrics on the memory as well. There's an extended view you can get from there, connecting to Grafana. You'll have a deeper view of those statistics for that specific machine, right? And that's where you're going to have, a lot deeper view of loads, bandwidth, IOPS, etc. on the different node. Right? And it's Grafana. You can go in there and see, let's see what's going on in that zone. We have, do it properly with the mouse here. You go. I can zoom on the, on a specific portion of the graphic. Right? Back to the main GUI. I can have a view of all the nodes together. I can search. This is a small cluster, right? We have what? How many nodes? 6 nodes and 1 machine for the supervisor. If you're looking for a specific name, you can do a search on a specific node in here as well. And same thing for the disks. If I click on the disks in here, I'm going to have a view of all the disks that I have in the cluster. It's a small cluster, but you could have thousands of disks in there. If you're looking for one specifically, you might have, to do a search. So it's giving you a quick view of what's going on. All the disks in here are all good. Okay, there's no errors, no read and write errors. I have a view of the advanced monitoring. This is the Grafana that I just showed you in here. So if I want to do a deeper analysis of what's going on the cluster, and let's take a look, for example, at the ring operations in here. Latency, IOPS, bandwidth on the different operations that I do.
So what's the process from an operations perspective if a disk fails? Can you just rip the disk out, plug a new one in, and it'll automatically claim it?
Yeah. First of all, you don't have to replace it right away, right? Since we have
It
replication.
depends on the amount.
encoding.
But let's say you're at 99%.
Yeah.
You'll have to replace
So
it.
if a disk has to be replaced, first of all, with the self-healing is going to rebuild, the portion of the key space, the object key space, which is missing on a disk, onto other disks and other platforms, right? And then you replace with a brand new disk, format it, and then it's going to be reused right away for putting new data on that disk.
So that's automatic. Is that right?
That's automatic. Well, you have to physically open the chassis, replace the disk, and then you
but-
have like 1 or 2 commands to run on our side,
Right.
just to
So those-
the
those-
cluster sees the disk.
Those commands, is that CLI based or is that from the UI?
For now, and correct me guys if I'm wrong, it's all CLI based, right? But it's not like 20 commands, it's a bunch of commands.
Right. And what if you have to replace a node? Like the motherboard's gone, got to put a new node in. Same type of thing?
So whenever a node dies, that's usually pretty rare, first of all. But let's say you want to decommission a node, right? What's going to happen is that the portion of that data is going to be rebalanced on the other nodes, right? And then you put a new node in. So you bring the node, you install the OS, you install the components of the Scality ring, and then you put it back into the active cluster, and there's going to be a rebalancing of the object with that node as well.
How long does the rebalancing take? I know it depends, but average.
We don't use it depends here.
Yeah, we don't like that word.
I can't answer that. It
But-
really depends.
It's fast.
It's fast.
Are we talking about hours or
You want to
days?
address
Or
that,
weeks?
Brad?
Well, I'd say one thing, if you talk to motherboard case, we actually just replaced the motherboard, have the disks,
Right.
and you're probably talking about half an hour
Yeah.
to an hour to put all the data that should have been on that machine back on that machine. If you're talking about literally losing all the data on the machine, with the machine up with 60 disks that are 10 terabytes each, it literally could be a matter of a couple weeks to rebuild all the data, because you're talking about 500 terabytes of data. So that's why he says it depends, because there's kind of two extremes to that case. But that's a background task that doesn't significantly impact the performance of the system. But the honest truth is we simply don't lose a server and its data. It just doesn't happen. That would take a flood or a fire or something like that. We've replaced motherboards or put the drives in another box and things like that. We've done those kinds of things, but it really doesn't happen. We physically lose a system with 500 terabytes of data. As you grow a system over time, you might add a new server, rebalance the data, and then pull the old one out. And we have customers doing that over periods of time. Our oldest systems have completely replaced all the servers, all the operating systems, everything over a period of years. So those are kind of background kind of operations.
Right.
So
What type of internal housekeeping goes on within the cluster?
So there's rebalancing, like we just talked about. There's you have self-healing whenever you lose a disk or you lose an entire chassis, which is pretty rare. But losing a disk, we know exactly the portion of the data which was on that disk. We know exactly the keys we have to rebuild. We do CRC.
You start rebuilding as soon as the disk fails. So you're gonna spread it over the disks that are still in the system, and wait for the disk to be pulled out and put a new one in, or?
So there's two ways we can do it. Generally speaking, the procedure we take, if a disk fails, we'll immediately rebuild the data on the other drives in the server. If an entire server fails, we generally have someone have a look and decide why the entire server failed before we rebuild that quantity of data. But the standard operating procedure is if you have a failed disk, the system immediately rebuilds the data from that disk on the other drives in the box.
And from a
standbys, or do people just use all the put them in live?
It's really not interesting to have hot standbys, because we just as soon use the drives to put data on them.
And for the monitor part, is that will a failed disk show up in here, and will it send the admins an email or something like that, or do you depend on?
There's different things. It's going to show here, first of all. If you list the disks in here, it's going to show you a failing. It's going to show you a color code telling you there's an issue with that disk. In GUI, I haven't showed you yet, but in the monitoring, the cloud monitoring here, there are ways to set up alerts on emails, even on Neep Chat today. We have customers that are sending messages on Neep Chat to the support. saying, hey, there's something wrong with that node, there's something wrong with that disk. So there's different ways here to set up alerts whenever there's a disk that dies. And that hook with the vendor that I showed you before, an example with HP, will have a way to send you alerts as well whenever a disk has an issue.
Doing anything preemptively? So if you're seeing a drive starting to fail, starting to have errors, are you able to do anything preemptively for it failing?
We're looking into that at a point, I know, but...
The whole question of when a disk has gone bad is a topic all of its own. We have a procedure that says this disk has failed. Write errors is typically a high on the list of criteria. If we do see something happen where a disk is behaving much more slowly than all the others, and we will proactively kill it. That's something we do on occasion. If you have a disk that's having a lot of difficulty reading bad sectors and things like that, it's very often much more constructive to just kill it.
And we do CRC check some, checks as well on the disk on read. And if we see, a block in object which is corrupted, we rebuild the.
Do you provide management packs for other operation managers, SCUM, VROPS?
No, not as of today, no. There's already enough GUIs in here.
That's the thing, right? You don't want that much GUIs.
No,
right?
Absolutely.
Some of our customers, for instance, for the Grafana, are importing the data into their Grafana
that's in
platforms.
So the API for this is fully formed and documented? You have a REST API so it can be consumed?
Yes.
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 So it's fully formed. There's no reason why you can't start building plugins.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
What's the maximum and minimum settings for the protection policy?
Oh, you mean erasure coding and replication? The max is 6 copies still.
For replication, it's 6 copies at the most for the data. Minimum is 1 if you're so brave.
Right.
Erasure coding schemes.
One being a single copy.
A single copy.
Right. Not one plus
copy.
one.
No replicas.
Right.
No replicas. Erasure coding is extremely flexible. We have a number of standard configurations we use, but it's very, very flexible.
And with the data reduction technologies that you have, so erasure coding, is compression in there as well? No. So it's just erasure coding.
Just erasure
right?
coding, yeah.
All right. Is that something you can turn on or off, or it's always on?
The erasure coding?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's actually set up at the connector layer. You could decide to have, an NFS connector giving you a 9+3 erasure coding, and then an SMB. And for some reason, it's only small files. You're going to do replication only. You can have a mix and match of different data protection policies within the same cluster. It doesn't have to be the entire cluster using the same policy.
By bucket or by container or by connector?
It's today per connector. So really see a connector as a module like a VM or a one-use server where you have an NFS access. Well, it's actually I didn't dig into that, but per volume, typically, you could say, I've got a file system, volume number 1, that is associated to 2 NFS connectors and 2 SMB connectors, because you need a little bit more performance. This is where we're going to do the 9+3 erasure coding in 3 copies, for example.
Okay.
So it could be as small as a single connector, but it could be a group of connectors as well,
to get the bandwidth.
associated to a volume.
Just a quick question. I remember the connectors, I noticed we had SMB and NFS. There was Fuse on the end. Do you have any use cases you can talk about on that?
We have customers using Fuse. We certainly do. If they're real Linuxy people, it tends to be media companies. I would say Linux-savvy media companies very often will use Fuse. Some customers running FTP for servers, for instance, on top of it.
Right.
And then we have an HTTP interface that's very popular with media customers as well.
HTTP REST, which is
direct
like the native interface, and S3.
Okay.
And you were talking about the media space before. We're seeing that trend where they want to go all object S3 because they love it and there's plenty of use cases, but they have plenty of legacy applications like an old transcoder, which is not even supported anymore, running on a Windows machine. So they will still need SMB access, right? So, and they have a need for a mix and match of object and file system access on the same cluster, which we can do today completely natively without gateway. Right. I know we're running out of time a little bit, so we're going to go to the, we got just one slide left. which is about a tool that we produced on the support side as well, which is we call it the S report. It's going to collect lots of data whenever you do an install. The user coding configuration, number of nodes, what protocol you put in place, the OS configuration, the log files, kind of like a picture of what you have, right? We store that in a database, and I was giving you an example before. This is useful whenever someone calls you and say, hey, I've got an issue, my SMB connector doesn't work anymore. We're going to request a new S report, and we'll be able to see what's going on. What's the difference between, oh, you've been touching the smb.conf file. You messed it up, and and we can take a look at it. Right? So we really use those as reference configuration for each customer and collect information on that. Okay? That's about it for me today.